Alright, we've just finished the intro. Let's see what Twilight's found in the library. What the hell? Rainbow and Applejack are covered in bees.
And the award for the biggest "what the fuck am I watching" moments to start an episode goes to this.
Well, so much for any worries I had about them forgetting about the box right away. Literally the first scene of this episode confirms that this story arc will be a theme throughout the season. That's probably the main thing I loved about this episode. The little teasers towards the story arc for the season. Also, Twilight sure does love to scatter all her books on the floor. This is like the 5th time we've seen this. Moving on to Applejack and Rainbow, it's nice to see a return of the whole Rainbow-Applejack rivalry that hasn't really had any kind of focus since Four Were the Friends. And who knew bees responded to whistles? But I do have to wonder how daring it is to be covered in bees when you're wearing a bee suit. Meanwhile, Rarity and Fluttershy are heading to the same ruin that Twilight and Spike are in right now. Interesting coincidence. To restore some tapestries. So in a similar fashion to the first story arc from the comics, the main cast are split into 3 pairs. Which, as a basic idea, is a great opportunity to better develop some character relationships. See, when you only have one other person, or pony, as company, you really have no choice but to get along with them. The only other option is to share awkward silence the whole time. I felt that the comics made great use of this by pairing up Rainbow and Pinkie, and Rarity and Applejack, as these characters offset each other really well. Twilight and Fluttershy didn't work quite as well, but it was still good. Sadly, this episode doesn't really take advantage of that idea, as the 3 pairings, Rainbow and Applejack, Rarity and Fluttershy, and Twilight and Spike, are relationships that have been pretty well established by now. But I guess if you want to force on pairings that you wouldn't normally see, you need some kind of unforeseen event to take place that forces the 2 characters together. Since nothing like that happens, these pairings do make more sense as just characters that actually like hanging out together, and it's still a great chance to show more of these characters working off one another. Which brings me on to the main issue with this episode. It has far less story and much more of a focus on character and comedy. Oh god, this scene. There are so many minor things wrong with it. Why can't Rarity lift it off the hook with magic? Rainbow and Applejack must have seen this wall spin round. Why don't they mention it? Why does a tapestry moving mean ghosts exist? And is it really that scary? Fluttershy must have heard Rainbow and Applejack talking and then screaming. Even if she doesn't recognise their voices, why not at least mention to Rarity that some pony else is here? And are you seriously telling me Fluttershy didn't notice the wall she was on, turning a full 180 degrees and then turning back again? It also bugs me why this eye moves. It's never explained. Though it could be a setup for later in the season. Oh, and anyone that thinks Angel is nice in this episode? Are we just going to ignore this part? Now look at this. His foot is purposefully stretched out, and being so small, he must have had to put a bit of pressure on that switch to trigger it. While he may not have known what the switch did, he meant to press it. This scene with Rainbow and Applejack is a lot better. Rainbow questioned Applejack's claim of being 50% less scared, a callback to the legendary 20% cooler line from Season 1. I also love the way Rainbow covers her face with her wings. However, this moment where Rainbow thinks Applejack is putting her hoof round her is kind of ruined by the fact that we saw Applejack standing a good 5 feet away from Rainbow in the previous shot. It could have been a good ironic gag. Rainbow is acting cocky because she thinks Applejack is scared, only to be scared a few seconds later. But since we know that's not Applejack's hoof, it just comes across as predictable. Also, Rarity really doesn't hear Rainbow talking and then screaming? God, I love Twilight's more rational thinking about the haunted house. I've often thought that myself when watching a lot of haunted house stories. Sadly, one haunted house cliche this story does have is the screaming. It got on my nerves after a while. Now, I did guess that the pony playing the organ was Pinkie before it was revealed. I mean, why else would she be the only member of the main 6 who hadn't been in the episode for the most part? But to be fair, I didn't guess it right away, and I do like the justification for why she did it. Very much in character for Pinky. If it were any other character doing this, it would have come across as contrived and making very little sense as a reason for someone to just come into a castle and start playing an organ. But with Pinky, you could just accept that kind of behaviour because she's Pinky. What a major improvement on the writing of this character from the last episode. I also like the baseball tune she plays right after they find her. And then another, much more interesting setup for a possible season story arc. Here's a quick reenactment of my reaction the first time I saw this, as well as my fear about this whole thing.
Holy shit, what is that? Oh my god, I can't wait for the next episode! What the hell's gonna happen? Fuck you!
Overall, this is an odd type of episode to give a new writer, since there isn't much of a story. He clearly does have a good understanding of the characters, and there are a lot of good comedic moments, but there is literally nothing else I can say about him right now. And considering he's a completely new writer, and I don't just mean new to MLP, he has practically nothing else on his filmography right now. That kind of sucks. This is also an odd episode to have as part of the 4th season of the show. Is this really the type of episode we are interested in seeing after watching these characters for 3 seasons? We already know Twilight is a bookworm. Rarity loves making things look nice. Rainbow and Applejack are very competitive, and Fluttershy gets scared easily. The only thing about this episode that fits well with it being a Season 4 story are the visuals, which like in the premiere are stunning and do a good job of keeping the tone a little tense even though we know these characters are not really in any danger. The character stuff in this episode does make for some great comedy, but otherwise this is certainly an episode that I'd say exists only to set things up for later. The journal, unlike the setup for the other 5 writing letters in Lesson 0, comes out of nowhere and doesn't really relate to the plot of the episode at all. I do like the way that this season story arc is currently only taking baby steps, giving us just little teasers of what's going to happen. But in terms of the standalone plot this episode has, it's just the characters acting exactly like we know they should. There really isn't much of a development of them. Unlike the setup for the other 5 writing the letters in Lesson 0.